Warning: this show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewers' discretion is advised. This show may contain strong language and sensitive or controversial topics. We are not attorneys and are not providing legal advice. The views and conversations are our own thoughts and feelings, and therefore, purely speculation.
The entertainment world and beyond.
Skywalker air miles feeding on a surface, gliding on water, constricted and conflicted.
Welcome to Purely Speculation, a show that exposes the harmful effects of the criminal legal system. I'm your host, Heather Lewis, the Executive Director of the Reuniting Family Bail Fund and practitioner of participatory defense. On this show, you'll learn about the unspoken horrors of the criminal justice system and meet fierce allies and advocates. We will make the best of our traumatic experiences. We will get angry. We may even cry. We most certainly going to laugh, but one thing's for sure, we're going to keep it real. Welcome to Purely Speculation.
When they free my sins and let them loose, they was killing me, I got scars to prove, got me paralyzed, I could even barely move. Out the way I took the pain again.
Hey, y'all. Welcome. Hope everybody's summer is going wonderful, getting their vacations in and whatnot. Y'all see, I got my tea on. So welcome to season 3, episode 8. All right. Like we on the back end of season 3. We have our guest list booked for the rest of the year. Which is super dope, something we've never done before. You know, we get better and better every season. So prepping for season 4. So if you're interested in being a guest, you got a topic, hit us up. But we have one of the dopest episodes packed with information and historical context that we want to share with you tonight. And so the bounty hunters to bail bonds, the evolution of the bail system. So a bounty hunter, word that we've seen on television, but it was a real thing. Bounty hunter is a private agent working for bail bondsmen, and this practice is illegal in only 4 states. Pennsylvania has very loose restrictions on bounty hunters, which allow them to enter homes and make arrests without a warrant. This stuff still goes on today. We saw Dog the Bounty Hunter, the reality show, and, thinking like that's reality TV, but that's real shit. And so I want to introduce the sisters the sisters, but the daughters of the individual that kind of spawned all this. So we have Tamika Jefferson and Xaras Collins, the sisters, the daughters of Tyrone Collins. Welcome, ladies. Welcome. Thank you for sharing your story, taking this journey with us, or taking us on this journey with you to talk about your father and the historical context and how because of him, the bail bond industry was born. So welcome to Purely Speculation.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So as we start every show is the origin story, right? So who's older?
What'd you say?
Who's older between you two? Who's the older sister? Tamika. All right, so I'm gonna be talking to Tamika. No, I'm just playing. The origin story is like, there's a family dynamic here, right? And so, where do you all want to start with the story behind your father? The how bounty hunters, came about because of it. Even the story just about him, forget about the family dynamic component, but his own story is pretty fantastic. And so where do you ladies want to start?
I can at least give a launching pad, and I'm sure Tamika will pick up. First, I want to say, Heather, thank you for giving me this opportunity again. A year ago, this was supposed to happen a year ago. And, I flaked at the last minute. There was so much emotion behind where I was last year, this story that I've been trying to piece together on whispers in a wind.
Right.
And at that moment, having finally reconnected with my sister. And I was so emotionally overloaded that I did something I never do, and that is to wait till the last minute to say I can't do it. And to say to you, I just met my sister. I'm trying to sort through so much right now. And so I think that's a good place to kind of start in, thanking you for this opportunity again and where we are and where we've been.
I love it. I mean, it's been a year, right? And so I can't wait to hear the story of what has happened, not only, telling your father's story, but what has happened and transpired in a year that you're here, the both of you are here, willing and able to tell the story and take us on that journey. So thank you for having the courage to, one, say that, and to come and give it another shot. I mean, this story is worth being told. Whoever's watching, we shot this around in some, Hollywood. Like, this is something that Westerns are made of and historical documentaries are made of. So like, this is like the launch pad. Yeah, this is such an incredible story. That yes, I'm so thankful and grateful that you two are here and willing to share.
So Tamika?
Yeah, Tamika, you're muted, so unmute yourself and let's dive in.
Let me unmute myself. Okay, so I think it's really important to understand that this story started in the early 60s. And, there were a lot of things, historical things that were happening in the 60s. Major civil rights movements were happening, and extreme tension between races and genders in the 60s when this happened. So our father was 19 years old. And, we're looking at the case happened in 1966. The event happened a couple years prior. So, he's a young man. He's hanging out with his brothers. Now, this is according to our uncle. And he was hanging out, with his brothers and a couple friends, and comes out of a movie, cinema, movie theater. And there was a young lady and, some of her friends, possibly a boyfriend, and someone thought he made a pass at this young woman. Well, she was a white woman.
Right.
And, the result of that was those guys felt like they needed to defend her honor, and a fight ensued. And our father was a brawler then, he was a brawler throughout his life. He won the fight against a group of white males, and he was accused of attempted murder.
Wow. Defending himself.
Yes.
So let me throw some nuance into that. Here's a nuance, like as a history teacher, when I teach Plessy versus Ferguson, I've always kind of briefly mentioned my family history, but wasn't really ready to fully share it and dive into it. The nuance is that our father is Creole from Mobile, Alabama. Blonde hair, blue eyes. In many ways, I sometimes can see somebody that has Irish traits, Scots Irish traits from a distance, and see the same sort of thing in my father. So there was these nuances of not just race, but colorism, who they thought he was, who they thought he wasn't. It was Governor Wallace's Alabama. And if people understand that context of using dogs, using, this was, the Alabama, Selma, all of it, and there they are in Mobile in that climate, but then also wrestling with this nuance of, colorism and passing and who is or isn't Black in America.
Right. Did the incident, was that here in Pennsylvania or was it down south?
Mobile.
Okay, got you. Oh yeah. Ooh.
Right. And that was why I initially gave the context of what was happening in the South at that time with civil rights, because in the midst of all of this, this is, like my sister mentioned, this is Selma happening. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X are at the height of their civil rights fights, Jesse Jackson, the NAACP, like everyone is on red alert on both sides.
Right.
So
Wow.
it was very, very tense. But as my sister said, this was Governor Wallace's Alabama, and they did use dogs. They used hoses, which we've seen,
Right.
and not just in civil rights protests or rallies. They used them in general, and there was extreme inhumane treatment happening across the South, but especially in Alabama and Mississippi at this time.
Right.
And so there was little to no justice for people of color, whether it was perceived color, and understanding that in the South there was a very clear understanding of who Creole people were. And while there were Creole people who were passing, everyone knew that Creole people were Black, regardless of how light they were or how dark they were. They come in all shades, but everyone knew. Yes. And so he was considered, and he was a Black man, but he was considered, what they called him Negro. And so this 19-year-old Negro boy attempted murder, and when he was actually defending himself. And so he was charged as such and held on bail, $500 bail. And our grandmother had her first husband, our father's father, had passed away. And our grandmother had remarried and moved with her husband to Pennsylvania. And so knowing, I would imagine, we don't know this for sure, maybe Xaras does, but I would imagine being accused of attempted murder in Mobile, Alabama at that time, I'm leaving.
No doubt.
You're saying that I sexually harassed or assaulted a white woman, and I, attempted murder, and I'm, arrested. These are all false charges, and I'm leaving. And I don't know if that's exactly why, or if he understood if he could or couldn't leave. I don't know, but we do know that he left and he went to Pennsylvania, and where our grandmother was living, and the bail bondsman followed him.
So who posted his bond? Was it family? Was he a bail bondsman? Like, how did he gain his freedom from that?
Xaras?
I mean, to the best of what, again, in the family, these were things that we just kind of heard in whispers. It wasn't, a sit down conversation. I mean, I have to, preface, what we don't know is a reflection of trauma.
Right.
Where the pains and the hurts are so much that people don't talk about them. But we live the impact of them. So there's a lot that, and this is why it was so difficult even last year to want to talk about it. Because there was still so much that was really almost speculation, trying to fill in some of the blanks of, like, what we do know is that they left. What we do know is that there was approximately a 3-month window from the incident to moving to Norristown.
Okay.
To answer your question, I need, there's not more research, we need to do on this. As far as I know, there was not an official bond that was posted, which I would believe was what gave some motivation of the courts to send bail bondsmen.
Right.
Tamika, what do you?
So no one knows. No one knows who or if anyone ever posted bond, or if there was a bond, or what I was told is the altercation happened and they walked away. So and this is by our, surviving uncle, who was very young at the time, but this is what he was told by one of the brothers who was there, who's no longer with us, if that all
Right.
tracks. And so he was not arrested on the scene. He was not later arrested and arraigned. If an arraignment happened, as a normal court process, he was not present for it, and he was not. So there was no one who posted this bond. So where the bond came from, they wanted to arrest him. He was accused. He was made aware that he was accused, but there was no arrest at the scene. No one came, to his residence in Mobile and arrested him and, arraigned him, and then the judge posted bond, or posted bail,
Right.
set a bail amount, not posted, set a bail amount, and then a bonding agency came in and said, okay, we'll pay this. Now you owe this to us. That wasn't
Right.
how it worked. The way it works today was not what happened then. So what we can gather happened was there was a warrant issued for his arrest over that 3-month period between the incident and him leaving to Pennsylvania. And based on the previous Fugitive Slave Act, which is where legislature came from that allowed them to even have bail bonds and bounty hunters to begin with,
Right.
they went to get him.
Right. And it sounds like, that is par for the course back then. There's no due process for people of color. Like you said, it was just trumped up charges because, they just, love to hate people of color and want to see them destroyed and traumatized and all of that. So it sounds like if I'm following it, that he was never, like you said, arrested. They just put that dollar amount out there and said, there's $500, go get that. And that's kind of the process. And it makes perfect sense. And, for them to pack up and be like, I'm out of here, because they knew what was coming. You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't going to be nothing nice. And there was going to be nothing but, trauma in the wake for everyone present, right? Everyone in the family was going to suffer the wrath of this, incident that was placed on your father. Unfortunately, but that's just what it was then. And that's what it is now. It has not changed much. Especially with the current administration, a lot of the due process, especially what we're seeing with our within the immigrant community and ICE and all of that, it's very reminiscent and of what was going on in Selma and Mobile and it's just, it's so triggering on so many levels. So I just want to say again, thank you for sharing this story, because I know it's hard, because this is your dad. It's not, a historical figure, somebody you didn't know. This is your dad. This is your people. And this is generational trauma. That stuff is in y'all DNA. You know what I mean? And so people don't understand that. People don't understand. And Tamika, I think, you're a psychologist, or you have some mental health background?
Yeah,
right?
counselor. I'm a counselor.
Yeah. So you know exactly what I'm saying, and how it just sits with us. And I'm being triggered, and I'm emotional hearing about it. So I can only imagine your family and extras, like you said, it's still, how many years later, that it's still triggering and traumatic to talk about, and just the violent nature of this country's history. I read something the other day, and that I paraphrase, I forget how the saying goes, but it's slavery is American history, it's not Black history. And it's we really need, I'm thankful that I think we as a people are starting to wake up and really start calling things for what they are, or changing how we refer to things, just so that we can start to move on and past, that label of being an enslaved people, and that we were slaves, and that we were this and we were that, and really call it for what it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm thankful that we're moving in that direction, that we're just, as painful as it is, it needs to be spoken. So that, it can be revealed into the light, and it can be
Right.
sanitized and all of that stuff. You know what I mean? So, I'm just grateful for that. So bring us to Norristown, Pennsylvania. The family moves to Norristown. Norristown's on the map, y'all. People come from all over the place, all over the world,
Right.
coming to Norristown. So was there a connection, or, new husband, we're leaving,
Right.
we're going to
He was a salesman, and Xaras is very familiar with him. So to give a little background, as really quick, really brief, and not to steer this topic, here, but to understand why there are some things that Xaras knows that I do not, people that she knows and that she's familiar with that I am not. And that's because of the nature of us being sisters, having the same father, and not being raised together.
Right.
And discovering in a very what's the word I'm looking for?
He's very roundabout.
Yeah, like it was what we were. We met when we were 11. Found out we were sisters when we were 15.
Okay.
Parted ways through different things that were out of our control, and
Mhm.
did not reunite for 25 years.
Wow.
So, and in the process of, Ancestry.com, DNA, 23andMe, and I started going down. I have a cousin who does genealogy, and so she's like, "Oh, you should do your ancestry." I do my ancestry, and I go down this whole rabbit hole of both my parents and who's who in the zoo, and I start meeting all these people from Mobile, and it circles back around, to me. So I learned about the story of our father through Ancestry.com.
Okay.
And then when I met family again, then I got other pieces and parts, of the story. So Xaras is more familiar with our step grandfather, right? Who I think she would acknowledge as her grandfather because she was raised with him.
Right. Right.
And he was a salesman, right?
I don't quite know what he did. I mean, to fill in some of that. So when I look back, there were so many things about what made this leg of the family. So this Collins is a leg of a larger, or a branch of a larger tree. That, there's quite a few things that were a part of this move to Norristown.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would, to keep it focused on this particular case, of the many reasons, one of them that I would come to understand is this moment where there is an clear, to quote the Constitution, a clear and present danger for my father's life in a place that lynched.
Yep. Without a care.
And without a judge, trial, or jury. So as I got older, as I keep revisiting the story, and I am a 26 years social studies, mainly U.S. history teacher, so as I kept revisiting the story and more things just kept making sense, I understood that part of this movement was this inherent fear for his life. And then one day comes this knock on the door when and just as so I'm looking at one of the things that we been able to really understand the story is the congressional record for, and I'm looking at it now, for February 23rd, 1966, where shortly, maybe in the course of a year after all these events, a senator picks up the case and is speaking on the need for bail reform. But yeah, the family came north, and by a series of circumstances, and I feel like I'm losing my train of thought here, trying to stay
So we're going back to why
so much.
Pauline's our grandmother,
Yes.
and Pauline, why our biological grandfather had passed away in a car accident in Mobile.
Yes,
Right.
shortly
And-
before the move.
Right. And so she remarries Mr. Sewell.
Because he was in the army. He was stationed in the army down there. So we got to remember that, Mobile was a major military installation. I mean, even a part of my dad's history was he was an underwater welder, which came from Mobile's history as a shipyard, particularly during World War II. Mobile was substantial in the building of warships, and our grandfather, our biological grandfather, was a merchant marine, and they grew up on this island, largely off of Mobile, Mont Louis Island. So there's so much in the culture of the history, the people that were migrating north, what they brought with them. But yeah,
there was an idea also at this time historically that up north was better, right? And anybody who's lived up north, as we all have, right, we know that race relations are no better in the north than they are in the south. But for Southern people, there was an idea that going north was better. And so that was another major reason for the move, because there was so much tension. Again, this is the 60s, and there's so much tension in Alabama at this time. And so they went north. They went to Norristown. They establish a home, buy a home, establish a life. I mean, buy a home, and they get settled there. And so our father goes to our grandmother's, home, and as a lot of young men do, right, 19 years old, and like, okay, so he goes to his, his mom's house, and the bounty hunters follow him. The bail bond, they didn't call them bounty hunters then. Let me correct myself.
Right.
The bail bondsmen. The bail bondsmen follow. Now, how they learned where she lived, we don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But that can also go to some of the tension that my sister is skirting around that was happening at the time.
Right.
In the family, in cousins, and people who did not want to identify as Black, people who or Negro is the term they used at the time,
Right.
who did not want to be associated with certain, like whether it be blue collar work, or so there was a lot of division in the family, along socioeconomic and color, lines, a lot. And this is a very old family, mind you. This is a family that dates back to the 1700s when Mobile, was established.
Right.
So these are very long, deep histories
Right.
of tension. So anywho, they go to Norristown. They're in Norristown, and while they're there, after this incident with the arrest, the bail bondsmen come and they knock on our grandmother's door and force their way in the house, and they apprehend our father and take him to a container, like a shipping container in the Philadelphia shipyard, somewhere near there. And they hold him in a container for, I believe it was 3 days.
Not even a
and
jail. Take him to a
Right.
jail.
no.
What?
And so our grandmother calls the police, and she reaches out to someone, or someone tells her to reach out to someone in the NAACP. And not that they got formally involved, they just connect other people.
Mhm.
So they got, kind of involved on the outskirts, because then that's political, right?
Right.
They know what the fallout's going to be. Everyone knows, what's going to happen, because this is the height. This is happening at the height of the tension. And Pennsylvania's stance is, you're not going to come in our state, right, and tell us, we have, again, what's his name, Jesse Jackson, marching in Philadelphia at the time, speaking with, and he had the Rainbow Coalition at the time, and and so he's very powerful and speaking out. And Pennsylvania doesn't, to put it plainly, they don't want no smoke.
Right. Not that kind.
Right.
They ain't ready.
Right. They're like, we got enough going on. We don't want any.
Right. We trying to get by.
Right. And so, you're not going to come up, and I think it's just a cultural thing. You're not going to run up in our state and take someone and not tell us, right? You're not going to ignore our laws. And so, going back to what my sister was talking about earlier, a senator, right, speaks out, and he says no. Now, by the time he speaks out, they have taken him back to Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And they do take him back to Alabama, and he gets returned, and the charges, are dismissed. They're unfounded. They're not dismissed. They're unfounded.
Amen.
And it just kind of gets left at that, right? So there's no real reform in Alabama as to how their whole process happens. But the greater reform that does happen says that you have to let us know. So a case comes up in 1966. That's how we get to that date, where they say, you have to let us know. There has to be some sort of reciprocity or some sort of conversation. If you're in pursuit, okay, you're actively in pursuit, of a violent, criminal. Okay, you let us know when you can. But in general, we're not just going to run in and out of each other's states, just grabbing people, running up into their houses, at will.
Right.
Sis,
shout out. We have a guest, William Jefferson. Does he belong to you?
He belongs to me. Yes, he
yes.
does.
Is that your husband? Or?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. He just said hello, everyone, about 30 minutes ago. So I just wanted to shout him out and say hey, to let him know we see him and thank him for joining us. And feel free to chime in on this conversation.
He definitely has opinions. He has thoughts. Very strong thoughts.
I'm sure. So he can.
Yes, as a Black man who has, melanated, I should say, but and I have to make that distinction because life is different for me being less melanated. But as a Black, man who is melanated, the world is very different for him, and he has very different experiences, with the government, with law enforcement, and
daily life.
Yes.
Daily life.
Yes.
And so since you touched on that and being melanated and how much melanin we have in our skin, your father, very light skin, I'm assuming he probably looked very much like you.
Yeah.
What did your grandmother look like?
Xaras.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Xaras.
She most of my life growing up, she had traits that she was originally from like the Florida Panhandle.
Okay.
She had traits that, whispered of a mixed lineage. I remember even sometimes being told, we got Indian in us thing.
Right.
So, but she was fair skinned as well. So was our paternal grandfather.
Okay, yeah, I was going there next. Like, what your biological grandfather look like?
Yeah, I mean, the traits show up in the various grandchildren.
They certainly do.
For sure, and it definitely played a significant role in all of these things. But I did want to kind of take it back to like the whole where I came to understand this as one of the many unsung moments of the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
Not just that this was this story of something that happened to our father, but that this was of congressional record. And where I'm looking and a lot of the details that I put together over the years were between articles in the Times magazine. The story made the Times Herald, so it made national news in the Times.
Right.
It made the Times Herald, and then it was picked up as a part of a number of senators that were producing a bill to halt basically what had been a continuation of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, by
Right.
which persons were just being scooped up off the street without procedural due process. And so, when I look at like a lot of what I came to understand about the legalities of the case were reading the congressional record, where they talk about the role of the bail bondsman and, that the bail bondsman, that a common law bail bondsman. So it's even like that trickiness of understanding Pennsylvania as a commonwealth.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only 4 commonwealths in the country, and what common law means, like common law marriage and those sort of things, by which it's really just saying this is kind of the accepted way we do things,
Right.
without really putting it into a codified, really strict legal, manner. And that the bail bondsman possesses the power to take, I'm reading from the court document, the congressional record, the bailee into custody summarily at any time and return him to the authorities who initially sanctioned his release, and that this power may be exercised even when the bailee fled to another state. Virtually no restriction is placed upon the bail bondsman may do to effectuate the return. There need be no compliance with state procedures, with procedures securing persons against unreasonable searches and seizures, or with any requirement that a person taken from one state to another without his consent be given a judicial hearing of reasonableness of the removal. In short, quote, the bondsman can act without the sanction of any state or federal tribunal. This is the common rule of the law today. So that's right from the congressional record that, these group of senators were challenging the legality of that.
Before you go on, okay, because that was congressional legalese, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us, I know what it means.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us in regular terms, regular language. We just talking like girls on the, having a glass.
All right.
Tell me what that means.
So it means a bail bondsman or somebody like ICE is operating as an extra legal outside of the bounds of normal laws and constraints, by which they can just kind of be this arbitrary, this random force showing up at your door, taking you at will, and denying any sort of notification, procedural due process, all the things that we require that later come as a result of this case, was requiring that bail bondsmen report to the local police department. And I'm thinking of the incident at Gigante recently and
Mhm.
some of the fallout from that.
Yep.
They report to the police at first. They must show a warrant and all the other things that follow procedure in the state that they're coming from. That they can't just arbitrarily just pick up and remove somebody, just kidnap. So this is where it starts to blur the lines and the question of, what is kidnapping. And so that is, if I'm talking to my girlfriends, it's just saying you could just show up like they did my grandma, come to the door at gunpoint, bust
Yep.
through the door, snatch my dad up and disappear. And as far as I know, now, and this is, there still are some people, like you said, that, some old heads, what I mean, that are still around that, have told me what they remembered. And I think it wasn't even just that he was in a container. He was in a van. And even the records show that he was in a van and he had been in out by Pittsburgh, and then somewhere between Indianapolis to Tennessee by the time they find him. So this bail bondsman was rounding people up. Now, part of what I learned from, this was, from a not an eyewitness, but someone that was very much a part of the events at the time, a family friend, Mr. Daly, as a matter of fact, who
the local historian.
yes, and I this is where we need a part 2, because I wanted to I
invite all
bring
of
him
the
in,
historians to share their stories.
Because he told me how he remembered them rounding up the NAACP, rounding up folks, trying to find him. Then the FBI gets called in. That's where they start to track him across state lines. So now that's where it becomes very federal, because not only did you come from Mobile, basically snuck into town and took, and so what I also understood was they just snatched him and he had nothing. So they take him at gunpoint and he had nothing. But then they went to to get some white guy, and they let him go to his car, get his clothes, pack a bag, do all this other stuff. That's what I got from some people around town and some family that knew the story. And then when they finally find him, of course, he hasn't been fed properly. He's banged up, beat up, the whole nine. And the Times magazine actually shows the picture of our father and our grandmother when he's getting off the plane in Philadelphia. So the FBI was a part of this returning him to Philly and back home. So here's where it didn't just happen to become a part of congressional record, and then all the details that we get from there. That eventually state put forth a bill to regulate the bail bondsman. And that they can no longer, and even in the congressional record, they cite that they can no longer act with the authority that they had since 1850. And, one of the things of not discussing this story a year ago is that here we are today, and we see what ICE is doing. And now you want to call out forces, use American military against the citizens of Washington, D.C., of which I was a resident of that area from 2000 to 2007. I know that that's just a cat call to go rounding up Negroes in the street. So it makes this case in this moment even more apropos about legal precedent, and what has been done, and that our father is this sort of accidental, unexpected,
Right.
Right.
and unspoken
Right.
part of that sort of second Reconstruction, that civil rights movement, and now here we are in this moment here. So
It's sickening that it's sickening that a law from the Supreme Court 150 years ago is still wreaking havoc, in our communities to this day. And that law, was established, as we've repeated several times, based on the slave code. And so that the bail bondsman got that broad sweeping authority from a Supreme Court case, Taylor versus I think it was Tainter. Okay. And so the Supreme Court said everything that she outlined in that congressional hearing, where how the bail bondsmen were allowed to act, came from that case 150 years ago. Well, what was that case based on? As we've already discussed, slave codes. They were like, well, yeah, we have to allow them, to go across borders because they have to be able to go get their property.
Right.
So,
Right.
But let's remember that Taylor was a white man. So why were they able and willing to go get this white man and use the slave codes to go get him? Because he was poor. Because he was, what last name is Taylor? He was Irish. And so they were considered less than the English. They were considered less than, they weren't good white people. And I'm not trying to, you are
hitting. You got to unpack it. You got to unpack it all the way, because white folk don't even know their own history anymore. They don't know their own history. And I said this to you last night, and I'll say it now. I'm convinced that this anti-woke movement isn't so much about erasing Black people from history as it is making sure that white people don't understand history. It's more about them than it is about us. And it always has been. Then they play the class card, and but you got to unpack it, because the other part of being Creole is that our blood is Scotch Irish, because we were adjacent to the Scotch Irish. Because who did they make the managerial, the overseer class? Was the second class white folk in that early wave of immigration that was largely Scotch Irish. The Italians and Poles and Russians, they don't come till 1880s.
Right.
So that is so much the history in that region, and how it just continues to play out in class and ethnicity and race and politics and power.
Exactly. And so moving forward, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
I was going to say, let me pause you right there, because I just want to, what you're saying is 100% correct. You're talking about 150 years ago. That shit's still going on today. We're a bail fund. We post bail. So I see who is getting arrested. I see who's getting cash bail. I see the disparity. Yes, it's majority people of color, but it's exactly who you said, the poor white folks. It's the white folks that aren't behaving the way they want them to behave. It's the white folks that have mental health. It's the white folks that have substance abuse. It's the white folks that like Black folks. You know what I'm saying? It's anybody that does not fit that English description, that good, upright upbringing. They don't give, they don't give a fuck. When I tell you, I see it.
No, they don't.
Day.
It's the same playbook that's been playing out for years. And the only thing that separates is to say that white privilege, dangling that carrot that, you still white, but ethnically, religiously, all of that. And I know, I see it with so many,
I think it's also really important to point out that bail reform is not about stopping, judicial authority to assign bail. It's about it being applied in the spirit of the law,
Yes.
you know, which is equitable and reasonable, right? So the word reasonable is used over and over again, right? So what is reasonable for? So what defines reasonable? Is reasonable defined by the crime, or is reasonable defined by the person's socioeconomic condition? You know, what defines reasonable? And you know, if I have a lot of money and I commit a crime, you know, like say I have $100,000, you know, I have $100,000 and I commit a crime, right? I may very easily be able to pay a $10,000, you know, bond.
Absolutely.
If I make, you know, the median, the American median, right, which is below 50,000, which is somewhere depending, you know, between 38 and 54, which is a broad number, but it's somewhere in there. That's the average American household income. $10,000 is a third to a fifth of your income. You know,
Right.
you don't have $10,000 to post bond, even though we committed the same crime. So
Absolutely.
then, is that reasonable? Does that pass the reasonable person test that $10,000, you know, is appropriate?
Let me.
And so that's where I think the reform needs to happen.
Well, and on paper, yes.
Yeah.
On paper, yes. In real life, we watch arraignment hearings every day, 3 times a day. You know who when we were talking about the reasonable, who is determining what is reasonable? It's not the judge. It's the police department. It is the police officers. It is the arresting officer that is influencing the amount of bail that gets assigned, and the judge just goes along with it.
That's a fun fact.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And that's not what our Constitution says. Our Constitution says that the judge is supposed to make a reasonable decision on bail.
Yeah, no, it's the police department, the arresting officer that says, I mean, I posted bail for people that have reoccurring disorders, you know, keep having, you know, police interactions, and the arresting officer is so frustrated, so annoyed by this person. Give them $10,000 cash bail, knowing that they're homeless, they have mental health, whatever it is that's going on, because they want them off the street. And the judges go for it. And we have the public defender's office arguing that this person is not a threat. I mean, we're talking about panhandling, obstructing highways. You know what I mean? So they begin to elevate the charges and call them something different, just like they trumped up the charges against your father, just so that they can get people in custody. That's what's happening. At least I can say here in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. You know what I'm saying? We watch it every day. We watch majority of the judges defer to the arresting officer. Whatever.
And I think that's where we go back to, you know, our father, as Xaras can attest. He did have my coloring, you know. So, did they know, you know, that he was a black man? Yes. So then it wasn't initially. It wasn't initially a color thing, you know, as much as it is assigning value to a person.
Right. Absolutely.
So they've assigned a value, you know, to criminals of color, people from different, you know, assigned a value to people from different ethnic groups. They assigned a value to people from different socioeconomic, you know, situations. So, you know, if you are homeless for whatever reason, you have less value. If you are a person of color, you have less value. You know, if you're a woman, you have less value.
Absolutely.
And you know, how do you talk, right? Like what's your vernacular? I'm going to assign a value to you based on that as well. You know, so again, going back to do you meet, you know, this, what's the WASP, right? You remember that term from back in the day? Like, do you meet that criteria? You know, and so are you English, white, and you don't have to be an aristocrat. You just have to be a step above.
White, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. So
yes.
I teach my students that so that they can understand that is a predominant American culture. That is the blue bloods.
Right.
That is I was here before the Civil War.
Yeah.
So everybody after that, you're fighting to be white. You're fighting
Right.
to be white, but you'll never be them.
Right.
And that's the part that, you know, I'm veering off a little bit in front of bail bonds, but you know, that's the part that.
But it's part of the bigger picture, right?
Yeah, that so many don't understand
yes.
about who they are and where they are in the system. So much so that you put blinders on to your poorness.
Right.
So long as you're white.
Right.
But you're not recognizing that.
But you got
you
to
don't
be the right
fit in
kind
that
of white.
circle, right? You're
Right.
So if you're Irish, if you're Jewish, if you're Catholic, if you're, you know, I mean, my, you know, students are shocked when they hear that, like, well, lynching also was of Catholics and homosexuals, and you know, those were the terms used at the time. But you know, to understand it, like, no, if you didn't fit this, you know. And then recently, I've been just, you know, I'm constantly, every time New Year starts, I'm revisiting lessons. And I was listening to a podcast because I love the Gilded Age on HBO, and I've always been. I get stuck in the Gilded Age when I teach it anyway, because now I got something to watch, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, and one of the things talks about, like, that when we go back to poor and classism, I've always taught the labor movement. I've always taught what the term robber baron meant, you know, but this took it a little bit deeper. I understood the company towns and industrialization and what it was doing, but I understood that they were reflecting Europe, but I was missing the political, social part where these folks, and we are living in another Gilded Age, the rich and the wealthy saw them as serfs. That mindset also came with all the European opulence that they wanted to reflect. They also brought this mindset of that feudal mindset that the worker, the poor, was still just a subject, right, of, you know, the rich and their machinations, particularly around labor and social control, and the two that are combined. Because even when you look at the history of policing in America, the history of policing is intrinsically tied to both slave catchers, deputized people. So this deputizing ICE agents and throwing on masks, this ain't nothing new. You just ain't wearing a hood. You just pulling up a mask in your everyday, you know, I rolled out the bed in my jeans and that's what you're doing. And that's the same way that slave catchers were deputized because police, legitimate authorities weren't enough. Right. And then when you look at the history of policing in America, it was also very much tied to the labor movement. So that's what's happening in the city. So in the South, the history of policing and that authority was largely an extra legal authority in these wide open spaces of country. That's why the sheriffs down South got authority that if you from up north, the sheriff to you just serves, you know, paperwork. Right. You go down South, the sheriff is everything. A Texas Ranger is everything, because of the way that open space had to be socially and politically controlled. Now you go to the cities, the history of policing stemmed around the labor movement and controlling the immigrants, because now that's your late 1880s, your Irish, Italian, Polish, Jews, all them. And then they're vying to become white. Right. In the midst of a labor movement and corporate owners that still just see them as, you know, serfs to be controlled and manipulated. And so that's the history of policing, is slave catchers and, you know, the Pinkerton agencies and all that, you know, were the militias of the corporate owners. Right.
Girl, this is deep. I'm surprised they still letting you teach this stuff in school. Right.
Look, this year, I gotta be honest, this is the first year that I'm like, okay.
Like, what can I do?
Let me just see what it's gonna be like, you know, because Yeah, I had a client that was like, "Yeah, teach them," and I don't know. It's been 9 weeks and a lot has happened. So,
Wow. Wow.
but I see teaching as that. That's my. I'm an activist, but I see teaching as my way of really being the witness, like James Baldwin said as a writer.
Absolutely.
That my role in these things is, I definitely can throw these hands, but at the end of the day, my role is to be the witness and tell the story.
We all have a lane, you know what I mean? And I love when folks know their lane and understand their lane and embrace their lane and crush their lane, you know what I mean? Like, that's your lane. You're killing it. You're doing what you can in your space and your capacity. Same with Tamika, same with me. Like, there's something, I don't like kids. I don't like young people. Like, they get on my nerves, and I don't have the patience and the tolerance. I'm like, we about to fight. You know what I mean? No, I can't do that, but I can.
And I teach ninth grade, and I love it. Most people are like, I don't want ninth grade. I'm like, give them to me, because they still got some things to learn. They just old enough to.
Yeah, you can,
but they still can appreciate, because them seniors, I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah, teacher, y'all, God bless y'all. Y'all are special people, and I thank you for, taking on that role, because it takes a very special type of person, and how to see what past the attitudes and all that. Even their trauma, you know what I mean? I have to, step back and like, all right, what's your attitude about? Like, all right, what happened today? Like, because you're not acting like yourself. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm finding myself having to check that. Hey, Demetria. So we got Demetria's hopped on with us. But yeah, like it's there's just so much, and I love, and I'm nerdy when it comes. Like, I love hearing this stuff, and so I'm sure that your students are just loving to hear all of this historical context and being able to share it with them in a way that they understand, you know what I mean? And really elevate and have them use their critical thinking skills, because that's not something that is necessarily taught or encouraged. So I thank you for that. We are at 1 hour. And so we have not even I don't even know if we got to the second half of the story. There's still so much. Yes, teachers are the light in a student's life. Yes, they are. So I thank all the teachers. Demetria, if you're a teacher, thank you too. So I think we're going to need a part 2. For sure, because this is just such a rich conversation, and we want to know, like, because even like we're flip-flopping back from 1966 to 2025, you know what I mean? Right. And there doesn't seem to be too much disparity or too much that has changed between that time, and it's just really unfortunate. So I would love to continue this conversation and just ping pong back and forth between 1966 and 2025, so that people really grasp what has happened. You know what I mean? Thank you, Tyrone Collins, for bringing forth and your experience. His experience, and that brought
we didn't
us
even get into how his case is used in current case law.
That's what I want to pick up on. I want to come back and not just our personal, but
right. So how it's affected current events and case law over the years, because it's cited. So it's a congressional record that is cited in case law, to clarify. But
I'm curious, because I speak with a lot of law students, and I'm curious if this is something that is taught.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So I'm going to start challenging law professors and things like that, the folks that reach out to me that want us to come and talk about participatory defense. We're not talking about bail, like we're talking about participatory defense, the movement, reform, and all of that. But yeah, because I love talking to law students, young lawyers, that they can have participatory defense, recognizing that there's value in community involvement, community support, to get the best outcomes for people when they're fighting their cases. But this is another tool that they can use and understand and fight. And just for context. So when they see and we're going to get out of here. But when they see, if they happen to be a public defender or if they're a paid private attorney and they're going into criminal defense law, and they're on an arraignment via Zoom here in Montgomery County, and Cheltenham Police Department does not bring the defendant out of the cage to be arraigned before the judge, that they be like, hold the fuck up. What is going on here? Because that's something that's happening also. And so all of these things where the presumption of innocence and all that, how am I presumed innocent when you got me, you know what I mean, pleading my case behind bars?
Right.
Now, and that's what I definitely wanted, because I think, you know, and I know we're trying to wrap up, because I'm looking at the record and he clearly stated 6 different procedures in the bill that not only speak to, you know, your example of just, you know, Joe Citizen that's getting caught up by the system, but things that I when I'm looking at ICE and I'm looking at what's happening doing, I'm like, this speaks to all of that extra legal force.
Absolutely.
That is acting outside the bounds of justice, authority, and due process. All that is wrapped up in not only just the case, but the outcome and what was presented.
Yep.
And this was federal, you know. So
I would like
I'd
to
love to
leave
get
us
more, like to the legal part of what it means for, like you said, it's 2025, and you know, I'm looking at this record like, wow, and it makes me think. You know, I think about the spiritual aspect of things. Like, delay doesn't mean denial. I was supposed to have this conversation with you a year ago. And what it means now to have had it. Like, and what, yeah.
A year ago was definitely a different environment.
Totally different. Would have been a different thing. It wouldn't be me, her, all of these things that it speaks to. Yep. You know, so just kind of brings home that sense of delay doesn't mean denial, and that his timing is always perfect.
Always, always. Hey, Miss Charlotte. Yes, I know you're Exorcist mom. She's like, I'm Exorcist mom. Know that, Miss Charlotte. Yes, Tamika, you were going to say. Actually, I think you had something that you were going to close us out on. And let me just say this, because we just, you know, dove right in and we just eating, right. Like, follow, share all of our social media handles, all that stuff. Stay tuned. August 26th, we will do part 2. And look, if we got to do a part 3 and a part 4, then we'll keep doing this thing until we have, you know, finished our plate. You know what I mean? Until, you know, we're done. I'm okay with that, as long as y'all okay with it. And like I said, I invite the Norristown community, anybody that's in Mobile that wants to, you know, chime in on this conversation. Like, this is such I don't even know how to describe this. A treat is not even the appropriate word. Like, this is so food for my soul, food for my spirit, but also just the knowledge of it and the contextual, you know, and just how things are evolving or haven't evolved. And so I'm just excited to have part 2 and continue this conversation. Tamika, close us out with your comments.
So you made me think when you were talking about arraignments and you know, them pulling people from Cheltenham or not. And so I said, wow, they're being arraigned by paper, you know, like as a piece of paper. And so I would like the audience to think, or anyone who watches this in the future to think, the judge's docket, you know, our court cases are backlogged. So why don't we have more judges? Why don't we have more courtrooms? We're building more prisons.
Right.
Why don't we have more courtrooms proportionately? Because I don't think there is a desire for justice to rule.
No.
You know, so I don't have enough police. I don't have enough courtrooms, you know, so these are excuses to violate your due process. And we can't tolerate it.
Yep.
So there's so many different facets to reform. You know, what they're putting in the news is that reform, you know, bail bond reform or any type of reform in this regard means we're allowing criminals to be, you know, put back on the streets.
Right.
That's not what we're asking for. We're asking that our legal system meet the time and meet the needs of the people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Period. And we will end on that because I mean, we can go on another tangent and be here for another hour. And so we're going to save all of that conversation. I have tremendous notes and we can rewatch this. But yes, we are going to pick up on August 26th. Demetria, please have your daughter hop on or watch the episode. But we definitely want to explore how this case has affected case law and how things are moving forward and how people aren't, you know, adhering to it and paying attention. So again, like, follow, and share, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get the notification that we're going live and this is going to be happening on August 26th so you don't miss it. And, you know, we look forward to seeing Tamika and Xaras again in 2 weeks. Thank you. Peace out. Don't hang up, ladies.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Purely Speculation. If you learned something, share something. Please like, follow, and share this show. The more our communities know, the more they are empowered and the faster we can create change. Purely Speculation would not be made possible without the generous support of the Community Justice Exchange, the Health Sparks Frank E. Boston Black Justice Fund, Philadelphia Foundation, and Reform Alliance. Thank you. Booyah!
Intuition different, already lived and dreamt it. Visions make my vision clear as I'm jogging through this fucking life. I be fog like with the fog set, body and I'm all set. Baby, can you be my Cardi B on an offset? Toast we got it, we building still material.